Red blood cells contain hemoglobin that's vital for oxygen transport. Hemoglobin molecule in the adult has two alpha chains and two beta chains, and by saying chains, these are polymers or polypeptides. So each chain has hemigroup, each chain attached to the hemigroup. Basically protein and hemiunit. Hemiunit is an iron atom surrounded by hemiunit itself, and the iron atom is vital to connect to oxygen, transport it, and release it. So oxygen binds to basically hemigroup or iron containing group. But again, there are four chains, each one has a hemigroup, so you can have for transportation 4 molecules of oxygen in each molecule of hemoglobin. Let's talk about production of red blood cells and how it happens. When the blood has consistent low oxygen level, it signals to kidneys to start producing erythropoietin. Erythropoietin, as a thrombopoietin, stimulates bone marrow to produce red blood cells. Of course, erythropoietin is for red blood cells, thrombopoietin is for platelets. And when bone marrow is stimulated, it will result in creation of new red blood cells, which are initially reticulocytes and then are mature red blood cells. So to answer these questions, why a man who is receiving chemotherapy for cancer may develop anemia? Because what can happen, the chemotherapy can be destructive to bone marrow and it will result in anemia. And why men with a renal failure would develop anemia? Because kidneys won't be able to respond correctly to erythropoietin need. Kidneys won't respond when decreased blood oxygen need is present. So in this case, kidneys just won't produce erythropoietin, bone marrow is not stimulated, and you don't have red blood cell production that's needed for the patient to sustain needs for oxygen. So patient will be anemic, even though nothing wrong with his red blood cell production from the bone marrow, and bone marrow can produce enough, but kidneys don't make enough erythropoietin, so bone marrow isn't stimulated enough. Bone marrow is the site of red blood cell synthesis, so it can be stored there and released. Immature red blood cells are nucleated. They have their nucleus. Reticulocytes are still have endoplasmic reticulum, although they lost already they lost the nucleus, and mature red blood cells have pretty much nothing but their hemoglobin. Red blood cells will last about 4 months, or some say from 3 to 4 months, because it's not like 120-day passed and red blood cell is checks out. And the reason they last, they are not staying forever, because their membranes become weak because of the fact that they have squeezed between the tissues through the very thin, narrow capillaries. It's wear and tear. There is no way for red blood cell to repair itself because they don't have nuclei, so it's just one-time deal. So no new components will be made. And the damage is, again, when red blood cells go through capillaries, they break because of membrane weakness. But again, membrane is not repaired because of the absence of nuclei or absence of really anything else that can help to repair the cells. So after they damaged, they are out of circulation. Most red blood cells will break in the spleen, and certain type of leukocytes in the spleen will process red blood cells, and it will result in creation of unconjugated bilirubin. So unconjugated bilirubin also can be produced in liver, bone marrow, or even lymph nodes. And unconjugated bilirubin actually a toxic form of bilirubin, and it has to be processed into conjugated form that we all see in the bile. In this question, while men with defective red blood cells will develop hepatosplenomegaly because there will be too much to process in liver and spleen. So anyway, but the main, of course, site of processing is spleen, and red blood cells turns into unconjugated bilirubin, which is in turn processed by liver, and iron is reused. Of course, we are not losing much iron through the processing of bilirubin. Unconjugated bilirubin will be toxic, like I said. So we want to turn it into something that can be used. So too much bilirubin unconjugated will result in jaundice, and jaundice is patient will turn yellow. Sometimes it's so extensive the yellow has somewhat green tinge. Liver can conjugate the bilirubin by linking it to gluconoride, and it's used for production of bile. Again, the question is very complex here. Why would a man with liver failure develop jaundice? Because liver just doesn't process the bilirubin, and it stays in the blood and stays there, accumulates and deposited in the tissues, and you can see it in the skin or sclera of the eyes. So what happens when your red blood cells are destroyed outside the spleen, and when it happens in some capillaries outside the spleen, which can happen, some worn and torn red blood cells will give up in the vessels. So hemoglobin will be floating freely in the blood. So when hemoglobin floating in the blood is not a good thing, it will result in hemoglobinemia, and the kidney will try to remove the broken or freely floating hemoglobin out of the body, and it will result in hemoglobinuria. I tried to make the squares appropriate color, and you will see the hemoglobinuria is a brownish color. So hemoglobinuria, it's not again bloody urine, it's free hemoglobin floating in it, removed by kidneys, and it will have color of whatever it is the drink of your choice, of Pepsi, Coke, Diet Coke. The most descriptive I heard was Guinness beer, and it really has that dark tinge of the stout beer, saying like Coke, Diet Coke, probably exaggeration. It's fairly dark like a stout beer. So again, I said here cola colored, but it's more dark beer colored. And in this question you can answer it, why malaria called black water fever? This is a trivia question, look up yourself, but remember what happened in malaria. This is not a test question to alleviate your fears, and I don't want you to spend too much time on it, but remember what can happen in malaria. And if you don't know, you can look it up. If you don't feel looking it up, don't look it up, but looking it up will help you remember the chain on the right side, what happened. But black water, remember where the what can be called water in human organism, and black water and fever. So good luck looking this up. If you have problems, please contact me. And again, this is not on the test.